Okay, we're going to get things started. So hello and welcome to the webinar, How to Make 2022 Your Best Year for Book Sales, which is being co-hosted by Westchester Publishing Services and Supadü. My name is Nicole Tomasi and I'm the Marketing and Conference Manager for Westchester Publishing Services, and I'll be your on-camera host for this session. Before we get things started, I just need to go over a few general items. First, that your microphones will be muted during the webinar. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please enter them in the Q&A window that should be displaying at the bottom of your screen. We're going to try to answer as many questions as we can during the last few minutes of the session, and we will share answers to all the questions received after the webinar. For those of you who are interested in live tweeting, you can please do so using the hashtag #BestBookSalesWebinar. And if you feel like tagging the co-hosts, our handles are @WestchesterPub and @Supadü_tweets. For a brief overview about Westchester Publishing Services, we were founded in 1969 and we became a US employee-owned company in 2014. We have offices located in the United States, United Kingdom, and India, and we are known within the publishing industry for our high-quality editorial and production services, which are used by more than 350 publishers around the world on over 10,000 publications annually. In addition, our Westchester Education Services division, which is based in Dayton, Ohio, provides content development and culturally responsive education content review services for educational content providers and edtech companies. Supadü is the leading provider of web design, e-commerce, and data solutions for trade publishers, university presses, journals, and educational publishers. They are currently working with over 250 publishers and more than 50 university presses, managing more than 4,000 websites and marketing sites, which see more than 5 million books per day running through their platform. Here you can get a look at some of the trade and academic publishers that Supadü works with, and some of the university press clients that they also provide services for. There is a lot of overlap between the publishers that Westchester provides services for as well as Supadü, so it was just a natural for the two of us to come together to present this webinar to you today. And let me give you a brief overview about our panelists who will be taking part in today's discussion. Sarah Arbuthnot works with our co-host Supadü, and she will be our first presenter. Sarah is the Director of Commercial Partnerships for Supadü and has been with the company since its founding in 2010. Fredric Nachbaur is the Director of Fordham University Press, a position he has held since 2009. He has more than 30 years of publishing industry experience ranging across marketing, sales, and editorial disciplines at trade, academic, and university press publishers. Last but not least, Joshua Tallent, who is the Director of Sales and Education for Firebrand Technologies, where he helps publishers of all sizes to identify solutions for their workflow and metadata challenges. And he's a very passionate advocate about the need for high quality book metadata. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Sarah to begin our discussion.
There we go. Thank you. And thank you, Nicole. Well, it was great to sit here alongside you all. As Nicole said, I'm Sarah from Supadü. Hi to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Consumers discover and purchase books online for many reasons: general online browsing, recommendations, love of genres, favorite authors, and also through marketing promotions. So when we talk about a website's effectiveness and direct to consumer sales, we mean, is our website helping us improve our chances of making that sale? Website effectiveness will mean different things to each of our companies, and it's dependent on what you want your website to do. Are you wanting to drive direct to consumer sales, or attract new authors, or improve your internal workflow, or perhaps it's a mix of all of these things? We're dependent on our websites now more so than ever. So understanding what's making our websites the most effective will have a positive impact on our business and on our sales. And I won't be covering how to measure your website analytics today, but if you want to discuss that another time, please reach out to Nicole or myself. I'm going to cover 3 areas to focus on to help improve our website effectiveness and direct to consumer sales. The first is website engagement. Engaged users buy books. Your website needs to be interesting with relevant content that your users want to read and explore. And we'll talk about the importance here of the product details page. And also I'll cover very top level complete metadata and suggestions on how to convert that visitor into a buyer. And next, I'll cover website search and the role this plays in improving our effectiveness. And I'll go through some suggested ways to improve your website search and increase user engagement. And the final area I will cover is how an important simple path to purchase and integrated fulfillment helps drive consumer sales. User engagement drives sales. Some marketeers actually claim engaged users are 5 times more likely to buy or recommend you than those that aren't engaged. So it's a very important metric that we watch. And where do we start with website engagement? We start with complete metadata. Complete metadata has a much bigger impact on consumer sales than some might appreciate, because metadata not only helps users searching online find your titles, driving traffic to your website, but when they come to your website, they're looking for more information, and it's here that your metadata helps make your website engaging. So your visitors stick around, they search, they browse, they engage, they buy. And I know Joshua will be covering more about metadata later on, so I really won't go into much detail. But just to say, a well-known Nielsen study last year showed that just 5 elements of descriptive metadata made a direct impact on sales. And these are a book title, which may seem obvious, then jacket images, cover images. The study concluded that those with jacket images sold twice as many copies as those without. And we also see higher user engagement and consumer sales in our publishers with more visual results. Then we've got the author bio, a long description, and finally reviews. Books with reviews enjoyed sales that were 83% higher on average than books without reviews, because these improve the customer experience. They're useful, they're engaging. And in this example of an automated book details page from our customer, the University of Toronto Press, you can see all those sales boosting metadata elements here, but also links to extra metadata and content. Look inside, previews, exam and desk copies, related titles, and of course our important social media links. So these pages done correctly will really help to improve your website effectiveness and title visibility. Previews or look inside on your product details pages can help engage your users. And sometimes we see users spend as much as 2 or 3 minutes on a preview, and that's all those minutes on your book details pages. And they're also great social media sharing tools. Some more engagement tools we use where possible are to add a cover image, as I just mentioned, but also offer your users all the formats you have available to purchase, even if these link out to third parties. And if you're still considering adding ebooks, then it might be useful to know that in 2020, US ebook sales were up over 15%, which may not be surprising. But what it does mean is that ebooks allow another channel of sales for you, and a broader one maybe with less rights restrictions. And of course, you can more easily look to sell chapters or rent ebooks. Marketing promotions are other super effective methods of increasing engagement and boosting direct consumer sales. And here we've got Manchester University Press offering 50% off a textbook collection. These types of promotions are really great at helping boost backlist title sales as well. Flash sales. I'm sure we all know about flash sales, but they're another really great way of engaging your visitors. And here we have Notre Dame, who quite regularly used to run flash sales by creating special landing pages with discounted book collections. So they're a really effective way to drive a sales spike. Landing pages, which should not be confused with your book's details pages, are really good sales converters, and they're great for SEO. They're marketing destination pages, and they have a clear message and a goal. They might be encouraging sign-ups, driving direct sales promotions, promoting an event or an author. They complement your book's details pages, pushing up that user engagement and title visibility. And then last in our kind of engagement is community pages on your website. They really help engagement and drive direct consumer sales. And here Kensington Books have done this through their online book club between the chapters. So this is great for visitor engagement and also to promote key titles and get your community talking and discussing. Next, we have the importance of our website search and the role this actually plays in driving traffic, but also giving us vital analytics, helping us to further improve our website effectiveness. Being able to find what you're looking for quickly is so important, not just for engagement, but actually for your overall sales. Around 43% of organic users go straight to a search bar, and users typically try out 3 to 5 search queries before abandoning the site if there are inadequate results, or they're just not relevant to them, or they're not fast. So make sure you deliver a full set of results fast. And this is where complete metadata comes into play, because it's providing all that information about the title we need for these search results and our findability. And if you have a search on your website, then monitor its usage. And it's really easy to set up in Google. And your site search tells you so much about your visitors, what they're looking for, how exactly do they search, the time they spend searching, the time they spend after searching, the categories searched. And then on to my final area, the ease of purchase and integrated fulfillment. So one of the biggest barriers to users not checking out, the average cart abandonment rate across online retail, including publishers, is around 70%. It's high, and mobile users have an even higher abandonment rate. So we need to make that buying process really simple. And good news is, by just doing a few of these listed, you can really reduce your abandonment by up to 40% in some cases. So you need to be clear on extra costs such as shipping and tax. This is a major abandonment issue where they are not clear. The site wanted me to create an account also factors heavily to cart abandonment. And this is something I relate to, as I leave my items in my basket for days and have very little time to create an account. So allow guest checkout. Make the checkout process simple, not too many forms to fill in, and consistently test your orders are running through. Not having any errors will obviously reduce abandonment. But then we say, instead of looking at your abandonment rate as kind of foregone sales, look at it as a metric for gauging eventual purchasing intentions of your visitors as well. So spin it around. So I mentioned a key abandonment issue is a complicated checkout, and we recommend ideally a one-page checkout and a checkout that's mobile friendly for certain. And preferably have a single cart shopping experience. Use image logos to help users find what you're looking for. Maybe offer Google autofill. Certainly offer the user options to change their shipping address. and offer multiple shipping options, allow them to easily enter any coupons and discounts, and offer various ways for them to pay. And of course, as I just mentioned, be really clear about the tax fees. And what do you need to consider when you're setting up your store for that easy path to purchase? Well, make sure the fulfillment of your products is integrated with your website, so your customers can easily buy your products, either your physical products or your digital products, digital copies, easily. So a fully integrated solution will also help any manual intervention that you as a publisher might need to do. And this diagram shows the process in a very simple linear form. It's not actually this simple, but all this will be in the handout of what we're trying to achieve in that simple path to purchase. Another less exciting but super important area is fulfillment automation, which I mentioned. So if you sell directly, your shop is going to be creating and sending purchase orders to your fulfillment providers and integrating with your tax provider, who will be automatically calculating that tax and integrating with your accounting or ERP system. So all you have to do is focus on getting more visitors, engaging your visitors, and improving your website. And another point of fulfillment automation is what actually happens to the customers during the fulfillment process. They've made the purchase. Now we need to send them order confirmation, shipping notifications, tracking notifications, notifications of delays, which we may have all experienced, and then when the item's delivered. And it may seem really basic, but it's really vital customer service, and often one that's not done particularly well. And then we come to DRM, digital rights management. Why are we talking about digital rights management in our website effectiveness? Because our goal in our path to purchase is an integrated shopping cart that allows users to easily purchase all formats from one cart. So those digital titles with DRM will need to be easy to buy. And how to choose the right DRM for you? Well, this chart shows customer experience levels against levels of DRM. So the harder the protection, the less user-friendly, but the more secure. But it's worth noting that most of our publishers choose social DRM, and of course, many of them have open access. But we have many publishers that use a mixture of DRM across their websites. And I'd be happy to talk in more detail about all these types of DRM if you want to reach out. And so to my last slide before I hand over to Fred, here is an effectiveness checklist, which will be in the handout. But in essence, make your website as engaging as possible with complete metadata-driven product pages and those important sales-driving metadata elements, and offer as many formats as you can. And make sure your website search is dynamic and fast and relevant, so users can easily find what they're looking for quickly. And then finally, make buying simple. Thank you, and over to you, Fred.
So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to give an overview of Fordham University Press and illustrate how we fit into the scholarly publishing landscape, and including the challenges of the past 2 years and opportunities looking forward. So I wanted to just give you a brief overview of Fordham University Press. Fordham, like most university presses, is mission-driven. We publish books based on their contribution to knowledge, offering a platform to underrepresented authors and topics, and diversifying voices and subjects beyond the top sellers that motivate the bigger trade and commercial presses. Fordham University Press is the 7th oldest university press in the country and the nation's oldest Catholic university press. It was actually established in 1907 by the dean of the Fordham School of Medicine, and the Makers of Modern Medicine was the first book published that same year. All titles published under the Dean's Leadership Concerned Medicine, Science, History, and Religion. The medical school closed in 1922. So as a Jesuit institution, Fordham is proud to have a prestigious university press that publishes books that align with their well-regarded academic departments like history, philosophy, and religion. We are autonomous, though, and have grown into new areas such as anthropology, race, and gender, and urban studies. I kind of like to think of us as a boutique press that publishes interdisciplinary scholarship and regional trade books that offer partnership to authors. We publish 60 new books a year, mainly dual editions, but we'll sometimes publish hardcover trade with a later paperback and an occasional original paperback. In addition to our well-regarded scholarly list in humanities and social sciences, we publish general interest books focused on New York City and the surrounding area. Since becoming director of Fordham University Press in 2009, I've launched 2 imprints, Empire State Editions and New York Relit, each with a unique focus on the culture, history, and literature of New York. These titles tend to get mainstream media attention in publications like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, and Nation, and the authors are heavily involved in marketing and promotion. The regional trade books typically sell in more significant numbers and help support the more specialized, narrowly focused monographs that are important for disseminating knowledge and bringing us recognition within the scholarly communities. So what I want to touch upon today is how a smaller press like Fordham can effectively use scale, by using distributors. So as a small university press, we rely on the scale of partners to help us maintain our mission and disseminate our content and collaborate with trading partners. Distribution, sales, and customer service and marketing support are handled by Ingram Academic Services for Fordham. And I just want to give an example of how this level of scale came in handy when confronted with recent supply chain issues and printing delays. We used Ingram's lightning source print on demand model to make sure we had stock available and didn't excessively delay our pub dates. Even though we had an offset printing in the works, we still put this book into POD, several of our trade books. One such recent title, The Book of Tiny Prayer, had back orders building and projections from our reps for 1,100 orders for the first 90 days, but our printer was delayed by almost 2 months. Instead of annoying our trading partners and customers, we were able to print to order and satisfy demand and minimize the delay to the pub date. It also kept our author happy. In the first 90 days, we sold over 1,400 copies. About 1,000 of those copies were print on demand. Many of these would have been lost if we had waited for the offset printing to arrive, and that would have been a major loss for the press. And in addition, we kept the author happy, and he was apprised of everything that was going on, so he wasn't surprised. And he fully supported our decision. And we actually shipped him copies of both the POD and the offset versions. So it's just an example of how scale can help a smaller press. In addition, we currently use print on demand for all of our narrowly focused monographs that have a limited market. This keeps our inventory lean and warehouse costs manageable. And we are using 400 copies as the threshold. And as noted earlier, we use POD as a gap strategy to keep pub dates from constantly slipping and to keep books on shelves and in the hands of readers. And we also use POD overseas to avoid shipping costs. Our distributor in the UK is Combined Academic Publishers, and most of the books they sell for their markets are in POD via a 3-way agreement with Fordham, CAP, and LSI. I also wanted to mention digital scholarship. Digital scholarship has transformed the way people read and research. De Gruyter's University Press Library, JSTOR, Project Muse, Oxford University Press Scholarship Online, and other platforms have made content discoverability and citation tremendously easier. Students and scholars can now find information on a myriad of disciplines at their fingertips in a fraction of the time it took to peruse the stacks of libraries and search for the data in print books. Fordham and other university presses have streamlined the dissemination of content by partnering with digital institutional platforms to meet the demands of the readers and the research, which I believe is a good thing. Unfortunately, sales of print books to libraries have suffered, but the exposure of the scholarly content has increased significantly. Scale helps to get our scholarly content disseminated and easily accessed to library patrons, students, scholars, researchers. You know, as a small press, we don't have the budget, infrastructure, or institutional support to create and manage our own digital platforms. So we partner with leading players in the library content field to make our ebooks as widely available as possible. Getting our books to the widest possible audience, whether in print or digital format, is the mission of all university presses. And as I took a look at our overall percentage of sales through these channels, I was surprised to learn that it's 41% of our overall sales. And De Gruyter was the biggest revenue generator in fiscal year 21, close to 20% of our overall sales, which is pretty impressive. There are other areas where scale helps us, but I wanted to leave time for questions and for our other panelist, Joshua, to give his presentation. So I'll turn it over to Joshua now, and thank you.
Thank you, Fredric. Let me show my screen here. So my goal is to be the glue to tie together what Sarah and Fredric have been talking about just a little bit, using my favorite glue, which is metadata. So direct-to-consumer sales, just like other sales that you have on retailer sites or the sales that Fredric was talking about through digital platforms that get your data into libraries, everything is driven by metadata. And this is all part of the larger argument that I have, that I've been saying for many years now, that metadata is your company's most important non-people resource. When you think about what you do as a publisher, when you think about the work that you're doing and the projects that you're working on, obviously your people are most important, but your metadata comes in a close second. So to understand how metadata impacts your direct-to-consumer sales, I want to talk a little bit about how Google and other search algorithms work. And Sarah talked about how search is important on your website, but I want to talk about how people find your website. How does the metadata that you create help other people who don't even know that you exist find your products and get access to them? Now, I'm not a search engine optimization expert. There are many other companies that can help you with that. I know Sarah and her team are really good at understanding this stuff as well. But SEO for publishers is directly related to the metadata that you have and the best practices that you do on the back end when you're thinking about building out your data. This will also hugely impact your website and the SEO of your website. So this topic is really not that hard. It's something that I think a lot of people can understand a lot better once you start looking at it. So let's look into some of the basic foundational concepts. So at its most foundational level, search engine optimization is really about showing the user some search results that are relevant, that have a high level of quality, that have some level of authority, and that have the requisite usability based on what the user is trying to do or where they're looking at the data. So let's look at each one of these items and talk about how your metadata best practices come into play in these different areas. The first is relevance. So relevance is based on the content that you provide. If someone searches for the best way to bake a turkey, we all had to do that last week, the search engine is not likely to return results for repairing the engine of a 1957 Chevy, right? The idea is that the data has to be relevant and the content that is returned to the user who does the search has to be relevant. And this is where we run into our first best practice for your metadata. The first best practice is provide as much content as you can. The more information you provide a search engine, the more information it's able to use to provide relevant results to people who are searching. So when a search engine crawls your website looking for content, it's going to index all of the relevant information it can find. Search engines don't do a lot of inference. They need data that you provide to see if the content is relevant to the results of the person who's searching. So give as much content as possible. And this means that you should work on providing all of these extra details, some of the stuff that Sarah was talking about before, reviews, tables of contents, excerpts, links, rewards, anything that you can think of. The more you put on your website, the better it is. In addition to sending as much of that as you can to your retailers, of course, because this metadata is not just intended for your website, it should also be going to all of those digital retailers that Fredric was talking about, and to all of your other retailers for print and anything else. Just remember that more metadata is always better. And also, beyond the search engine optimization, having more content on your website helps your pages encourage more interaction, as Sarah was discussing, and it helps convert browsers into buyers. So this also leads us to our second best practice, which is fresh content is better than stale content. The content that you provide on your website should be as up to date and be as updated as often as possible. Frequently, people don't do updates, but if you do frequent updates to your to your website, then search engines can recognize that the content is relevant because it's fresh, it's new. And this can be done in quite a few different ways. You can have an author write blog posts about the topic of their book. You can post new excerpts or short pieces periodically. If you do fiction, you could publish character bios or related short stories and other things like that over time. You can also have other details and other information that's being added, like Sarah was talking about with the community and having people add content to the site themselves, users adding content themselves. Essentially, anything new is helpful. So try to add new content whenever you're able to. And relevance is also defined based on the words that you used. So a list of keywords, like what you send out in Onyx to your retail partners, is more likely to help with discoverability on Amazon than it is with discoverability in Google. But this also leads to our third best practice. Integrate your keywords into your book descriptions and other long form content. Now, this is actually where having a separate book description for your website than the one that you send out to retailers might be helpful. You might want to craft a description that discusses the book content while utilizing those important keywords and phrases without necessarily messing with the description that you're sending out to retail partners that might be a little different. Since you're also potentially writing a longer description than you send out to retailers, you might also want to set up that ability to send out different descriptions to the different locations. Okay, so let's talk about the quality of your website content. Now, this point is connected to the relevance point, of course, and our two best practices that we just talked about will help you create better quality metadata, not just more relevant metadata. But quality has to do with two other important items as well. So best practice number 4 is that you include images with your metadata. And Sarah talked about this as briefly as well. If at all possible, include additional images even beyond the cover image. That's especially true for nonfiction, which often benefits from interior images. And also, if you're creating extra content like blog posts or other pages on your site that are related in some way to your book content, make sure that those pages have images too, because those images can be picked up by search engines as well, and also can be shown whenever people put a link to your website. They'll show often in Slack or other places, you'll see a little image, and it's helpful to have images on the page that are related to the content that you're posting. Quality is also dependent on relationships. So best practice number 5 is to use relevant links in the body of your content as well. Now, these can be links to articles, to news, to additional details about the author. They can be links to other books that you publish that are similar or related to this one. And that's obviously a really important thing to include on all your product pages. But these links can be to places on your own website, but often they're better when they're links to places outside of your website. Keeping those pages up to date with outside links, pointing people to other places, makes your site more reliable and more of a source and a resource for people who are interested in the topics that you publish. For nonfiction, this may also include creating errata pages or updates sections on your book's product page that allow you or the author to provide updated links to outside sources or footnoted sources that might change over time. Now, that's especially helpful as you start to think about your data as a long-term investment and not just a one and done kind of thing, because sometimes those sources that they quote in their footnotes might actually be out of date, and it might be better for you to have links to the updated resource or a new resource out there on the web. So authority is another element to your website search engine ranking. And in essence, what this comes down to is the question of whether other prominent websites link or refer to the content on your site. Now, this can be really hard to do, but it is helpful if you're able to manage to do it. Again, creating new and additional and relevant content can be the biggest factor in increasing your general visibility and that outside engagement of your content. A blog might be one of the best tools at your disposal for this purpose. And that can be something that is used by all of your different authors as they promote their book or as they say things about the topics that they publish. Also, that community concept, the idea of having a book club or things like that Sarah mentioned earlier, is again another great idea to do here too. So build community on your website, start and engage conversations and get people talking about your books. And if at all possible, point people to your website from everywhere else and get other people to point to your website as well. Now, the last item on our list here is usability. And I specifically mean the usability of the content of your website under different circumstances. So that brings us to our sixth and final best practice, and that is to make your website accessible and to make it mobile friendly. Accessible website content is naturally just easier to maintain. It's easier to format. It's easier to convert to other formats as well. Mobile-friendly websites allow consumers to interact with your content on phones and tablets and computers and on any other device they happen to be using that's internet connected and has some sort of screen on it. So to finish up, let's tie this together a little bit with what Fredric was saying as well. When you run up against the problems in the supply chain that he was talking about before, having good quality metadata, having your metadata set up in such a way that you can easily manage sending it out to anyone that you need to, can quickly make the update of, okay, I need to send this to Ingram and put it in LSI so we can get some books printed. It makes that process that much simpler. Also, sending data out to digital platforms that deliver your content to libraries or setting up a new partner, all of that is done much more easily when you have metadata set up and managed in place, and you don't have problems sending that data when the data is high quality. And also, don't forget that this process and the impact that it might have takes time. It takes effort. So don't expect immediate results from any one change that you make, but all of the changes that you make together will impact your sales and will provide you with the ability to extend your sales to more platforms and to meet your readers wherever they are. Nicole, back to you. Or Grace, who's taking over?
I'll be taking over at least on the camera, and Grace will be doing stuff behind the scenes as she has done throughout with my thanks. I'll just give that out now. Okay, so excellent presentations from all three of our panelists, a lot of great information in there. And now I'd like to turn the discussion to some of the questions, some of which we received prior to the webinar today and some which we have received while the discussions were ongoing. So to begin with, I guess one of the questions I have in all this and might be on the minds of some of the attendees here is there's a lot of good ideas here, but the question is, the bandwidth within organizations to cultivate this data and update it and keep it fresh. For a small publisher, how do we go about doing that and making it a not very difficult task? And I guess maybe I'll start with Fred or Sarah. Maybe you guys could provide some tips about, how publishers can address that.
Can you repeat the question, Nicole? Sorry about that.
So the question is with, cultivating metadata and making sure the content pages across your websites are updated and relevant and, easy to find and search. The question comes around to how do you make sure that you have resources within your own operations to facilitate that and keep all that going along with everything else that publishers are required to do these days?
Yeah, I can give one small tip that we use for all of our new books. We do list planning, so we're about to close our fall 22 list, so we kind of know which titles are coming out. And before we launch them, we have weekly launch meetings, which means we put the book into production. We ask the author to fill out an author questionnaire, so they submit that before we launch that manuscript into production. And on that author questionnaire, we actually asked for keywords. And we also asked them to fill out a document called abstracts and keywords, which helps us to really, because they know the content better than anyone. So then we take those documents and then we fill our database. We use BiblioLive, which is our house title database, and that feeds to everything. So our website, to our trading partners, to some of those digital platforms that I mentioned during my presentation, like De Gruyter and Project Muse. So then, we're not creating it from scratch. We have a foundation to work from, and that's been tremendously helpful to use those documents in building our keywords and our abstracts for the various purposes and trading partners.
Great, thank you, Fred. A question now for Joshua. There's a, kind of, when is more in terms of metadata too much? That's one of the questions we received.
I don't think there's ever such a thing as too much metadata. I think the problem is that most publishers don't give enough as it is. So it's better to have more than to have not enough. I would say if you're focused on metadata and you have somebody on your team who's focused on that, which I think is really important, to have a person who is dedicated to managing your list and managing the product data that you have, then that person's going to be busy. There's going to be a lot to do. I showed some examples of this, and Sarah talked about some examples of this, but having a long form descriptive copy, having excerpts and reviews and all the other details, that's helpful for your potential consumers to know that they want to buy that book. It's helpful for more of your partners to use those. I also highly recommend that you put more data out there, because right now we have actually a problem in the industry where retailers don't think they should show extra information like tables of contents or excerpts and things like that. And some retail sites don't even show reviews. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we haven't been providing it as publishers. A lot of it is, retailers look at what they're receiving and say, well, if we don't have the data, why take the time to put it on the site or to show it to consumers? So the more publishers put the data out there, the more they show that data and provide that data, the more likely it is to be used and the better it is for consumers. So I don't know that there's actually a too much kind of issue here. It's usually a not enough issue.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. Sarah, question for you. What e-commerce platforms do you recommend that publishers use? Are there any specific ones that really tend to drive more sales, or is it a more is better concept here as well?
Yes, well, I can't speak for any other ones apart from what we use, because we don't work with them. But yeah, it's definitely important to find the right e-commerce solution for you. Supadü we build using our Supercart, which is a third-party cart, and Shopify websites. And it depends on what the publisher needs to achieve. And there's many different reasons why we might choose one or the other. There may be tax requirements, there may be institutional requirements, there may be third-party requirements, currency requirements. So really, it's looking at what you're trying to achieve in your e-commerce journey, and where you're trying to sell. Is it just localized or is it global? And then working back from that. So I don't think it really answers the question, but maybe starting with a list of what you need to include and what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, and I guess springboarding off of that, this could be a question for Sarah as well as for Fred. As a smaller publisher who may be doing a lot of direct website sales, what kind of steps do you take or should you be taking to drive customers to your site in addition to quality data and content on the site?
I can answer for Fordham. We do an e-blast for every single book that we publish. So when a book releases, a new book, we do an e-blast to our community of readers, people that have signed up to receive information about our new releases. So that directs people to our site. And we also, authors are using social media very aggressively. And so we're asking them to direct to our site in that way. So I think those are two simple things, to help drive, direct sales to your website.
And yes, absolutely. I completely agree with everything Fred says. And also, you know, sales from your website, you get a much higher profit margin. So that's a benefit. Plus the fact you're collecting that customer data, and your community, when you do want to recommend a new title or do an email blast, they're going to be listening to you because they trust you, and they're going to be much more likely to buy from you in the future. So it is an important channel of sale for sure.
Okay, and I have a question that came. Oh, I'm sorry, Fred.
Oh, no, just one quick thing I wanted to mention is that I've noticed recently that a lot of our authors prefer to drive customers to our own website rather than Amazon. It's interesting. So that's an interesting trend that I've noticed, which, you know, as Sarah said, it's better profit margin for us.
Indeed. And I think we did get a question in here about, well, I know somebody had sent a comment in the lead up to the webinar asking if Amazon was going to be the death of all of us. So I'm really happy to hear that no, the authors are shifting to publishers' websites. So that's encouraging news to hear. A question for Joshua here that came in over the Q&A. Somebody's asking for a definition of metadata because they're thinking that this came across as a much more broader use of the term than they typically hear. So could you expand on that?
Yeah, metadata really is any data about your book. Anything that is connected to, to your book, any, book descriptions and reviews and excerpts and tables of contents. You also have obviously, details about the product itself. So the page count and the trim size and the price and all those other details. But metadata is really just the data, the information that describes your book. It can also include things like references to other comp titles or to other similar titles of some kind. All of that is data. All of that is information. All of it should hopefully be tracked in one place where it can then be distributed, as Fredric was talking about before. The idea is to put all of that data in a place where it can be managed and maintained and then delivered where it needs to go. But metadata is anything. It includes also cover images, interior shots, any of the other assets and details. Even in a sense, your ebook assets can be considered metadata in some ways because they're related to your book. But anything that describes your book is considered metadata.
Thank you. And springboarding off of that, we know that backlist and ePubs and ePDFs, these are additional ways to drive sales and drive people to websites to purchase content. I guess the question is how should publishers be looking at backlist in a different way as we go forward in order to maximize the potential of that content as well as any related frontlist matter, whether from that author or in similar subjects, to continue to drive sales? And this is a question really for anybody to jump in and answer.
Yeah, I'll start off. Backlist sales make up 69% of all total book sales in the US. And it's higher in certain categories and lower in others, but that's what MPD reports. When it comes down to it, your backlist is one of your biggest assets, and you really need to manage that asset in a very strategic way. And I think a lot of publishers do themselves a disservice by ignoring the backlist and just saying, well, I already did all the marketing, I already did all the planning, I already did all the preparation of the metadata and everything else at the front end when it was in the front list or prepub, and now it's done. Taking some time to go back and update your data, to add new reviews, to think about how the book is being positioned, to do marketing and advertising for a title that's 2, 3, 4 years old. There's a ton of research that's showing that backlist titles in the 2 to 5 year range are actually better selling in some cases than frontlist titles. So it really depends on the type of book, but there's a lot of value in looking at your backlist titles, keeping that data up to date, and maintaining that list. And that takes time, it takes effort, but it actually is worthwhile in the end, especially when you have such a large percentage of sales in the backlist.
Yeah, and I would just add, just promoting those backlist titles. We have a partnership with Open Road Media, and they are amazing at reaching their customers. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing sometimes. We had a title that was backlist, probably 6, 7 years old, and they did a St. Patrick's Day promotion. It was an Irish American book, and we sold 3,000 copies of the ebook based on their efforts. And it means they're constantly reaching their customers, like keeping that balloon in the air. They keep, pushing it up, and it was just, we saw the results, which was great. The other thing I would mention is, the timeliness of your backlist. How does it tie into what's going on in the news? When there was the George Floyd case and the Black Lives Matter, movement going on, the books on race and anti-racism just sold through the roof. It was amazing. So just, what's going on, and, making sure that your backlist is out there and tying into newsworthy items.
And I guess that's where POD becomes especially important, because if something, skyrockets due to the news cycle or current events, and with everything going on in the supply chain, getting that content out quickly for those people who want the printed version as opposed to an EPUB, that could, be very, very key. But speaking of EPUBs, what are steps that publishers can take to kind of future-proof their printer and EPUB files? This way, if you have to, change over to print on demand, or change printers, or change digital formats, what sorts of things should publishers be keeping in mind to be prepared to make those pivots?
So, Fredric, you probably have some on the ground experience on this, but I can talk about it a little bit as well. I think one of the most important things for your EPUB is the accessibility of the EPUB file, making sure that it has good built-in accessibility. It's easier to update an EPUB that has built-in accessibility, because it's just natively going to be a much cleaner HTML code behind the scenes. And if you're doing open access, that obviously is an important part of that as well.
Right, exactly. And I always treat, EPUBs and, ebooks as just another format. So, you do cloth, paper, you do E. And so it's just really just a different version. And we've been doing, simultaneous, if we have the rights, for every book since 2010. So every one of our books, if we have E rights, we create an EPUB and a web PDF, so 2 different versions. And the other thing is to really have a really good digital assets management system, archiving those files so they're easily accessible, so that whoever is on, in the house at the press can access those. And if there's turnover, that person, the new person, knows where they are. So it's just really having that access and really good archiving.
And Sarah, a kind of related question to that. Are you seeing any trends within the Supadü platform in terms of adding enhancements to EPUB files that help improve sales on either iBooks or the Kindle store? Or do you find that things are going towards a more simpler EPUB that can work across more devices?
Well, I think we might kind of back up a bit, and like publishers are, many publishers are still getting lots of their titles into EPUB, and some of those backlist titles into EPUB. We are seeing a trend in publishers now selling all formats from their website, whereas before it was kind of quite disparate, where physical sales may be from the website, but ebook sales would be handled over here. So it's all coming under one roof. We're seeing an increase in audiobook formats from the website. That's something we're definitely seeing. Accessibility within ePubs, we're definitely seeing that. But additional information within the EPUB, I wouldn't say necessarily, but I think, as Fred mentioned, we're just seeing it's just another format, and it's treated the same as any other title now, which is great.
Indeed. We have a couple of minutes remaining, and I have a few more questions that we'll be able to get to live. And one of them is for Fred, and the question is how can university presses help to address the new normal, if you will, around remote learning and digital delivery services?
Well, I think, part of that is, having your book available in many formats, and including ebooks. And one example I can share is during the early days of the COVID lockdown, March 2020, April, everyone was in a major panic. And, I can just, speak from Fordham. It was just like March 13th, it was like shut down. The students were told to leave, the dorms were emptied, staff were told to leave, and it was just really kind of mind-blowing. And then we wanted to help the professors, so we started making our content available digitally. We made it open access if we could. Some of our digital platforms, some of the ones that I mentioned, Muse and JSTOR, said, would you be willing to make this content available, open access for a limited amount of time, just so we can help our communities, the libraries, the students, the teachers. They're just desperate for content. And we did, and it was for a limited time. And so it was really a good faith effort to show that we're good partners. And I think it really was a really decent thing to do. And I think it helped, just get our content out there. And I think in the long run, it's good for our reputation and for the exposure of our books.
Thank you. And I think we'll just take one final question here before we wrap. And it's a general question, really. So with all the supply chain disruptions that we've been talking about in terms of printing, shipping, and distribution, what kind of things are you keeping in mind when planning for frontlist releases next year?
Just quickly, I would say building in time. Our production manager, design and production manager said, Fred, we need to build in a lot more time now. So really building in that time for the production schedules to allow for those delays that are going to happen at the printers.
Okay, thank you. And I want to take a moment to thank you, Fred, as well as Sarah and Joshua for sharing a lot of great tips for our attendees to take away with them and hopefully implement into their own business plans if they weren't doing so already. We will be sharing this recording out along with some of the handouts that were referenced to you, and that'll be coming along in about the next week. And just a reminder that Westchester Publishing Services, as well as Supadü, we are here to help our clients and colleagues in the publishing industry and look at solutions that can resolve any of the challenges that you're facing in your editorial and workflow or your sales and distribution in the case of Supadü. And you can direct any questions that you have regarding today's webinar to me. My email address is right there on the screen. And in closing, just if you could take a minute and complete this 3-question survey that's going to come up on your screen at the conclusion of the webinar. That really helps us understand if the content that we're giving to you is informative and helpful, and to determine what other topics to bring to you in the future. So again, my thanks to our panelists as well as to Grace and Tallent behind the scenes, and wishing you all season's readings and great sales to come in 2022. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
guys.
you very much. Bye.